Members, welcome to the first regular meeting of the panel on food safety and environmental hygiene. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. The minutes have been forwarded to members, and we have not received any proposed amendments from members. Can I invite members now to confirm the minutes, please? Any objection? No. Minutes confirmed. After the 10th of October, the election of chairman, deputy chairman, since that meeting, we received a number of letters from members and also response from the administration, and all these have been forwarded to members. For the latest received, there are two, Dr. Kokaki and Dr. Kenneth Chen about some iced food, chilled food, and also another document on chlorophyll dyeing. This have been forwarded to members. Of course, members must have noticed that recently there's been concern expressed about food safety, oil, aquatic products, and so on. For some of those queries, members of the administration has responded to that. But since it all involves food safety, so perhaps I'll talk to the administration, see if we could advance the item on food safety, that is item 19 on the list of outstanding items, and to see if they could advance that to an earlier meeting. That is a report on the food surveillance program for 2013, because this is a matter of great concern to the public. So perhaps I'll talk to the administration to see when we could deal with that item. This to give members a chance to talk directly to the administration. Date of next meeting. th of December, Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. in the same conference room. There is a list of outstanding items for discussion that's been forwarded to members too. After the election meeting, I, together with the deputy chairman, met with officials of the Food and Health Bureau, and we have already worked out what we would like to raise with them. Is in the list now for your information. The next meeting on the 10th of December, at that meeting we will deal with 3 items. First one, proposed measures for compliance with fire safety requirements by food premises. A member suggested that we should listen to the views of the sector and various organizations. So on that day, we will be meeting with deputations. Another item we'd like to take up is the stress test review of powdered formula. So this will be also for the December 10th meeting. Another item the administration would like us to look at is the review of small volume exemption fees, proposed amendments to foods and drugs composition and labeling regulations. So for the December meeting, we will take up these 3 items because we have to meet with deputations as well. So we believe there's a need to extend the meeting. Can I propose that we extend the meeting by 30 minutes? That means from 2:30 to 5 o'clock. That's the December meeting. Any objection, please, for the next meeting? Mr. Wong Kwok Heng. Madam Chair, I have no strong views on 3 items proposed for the next meeting, but I would like for item 24, supply of live cattle. Can you also discuss with the administration when we could deal with this item at the earliest opportunity? Because we've been talking about the supply of live cattle for a long time. We know that the Central People's Government is willing to open up the supply channel And in Dongguan, we know that someone has set up a farm. Yes, I'll put that on record. Please, Madam Chair, because now it's scheduled for discussion only in April to July 2014. That's too late, because April to July is already the second quarter of next year. That's far too late. Yes, we've heard your views, and so we'll see how we could schedule the agenda items. So for next meeting, we'll extend it. Please note. And then next Tuesday, 19th of November, as you know, there is a special meeting. We have consultant members by circulation about this meeting. It's about the niche and columbarium. The organizations would like us to take up that issue very quickly, and because we have a full agenda at our regular meetings, that's why we've proposed a special meeting. So next Tuesday, the 19th of November, there will be a special meeting of this panel, and we will just focus on two items. One, the primary item is the regulation of private niche and supply of public columbarium. We will ask the administration to speak. We'll ask the administration to tell us what they propose to do, and then there will be deputations too. So now this is a matter of great public concern. So far, 41 deputations would like to come and give their views at the Tuesday's meeting. So please note that. So just a meeting with the administration and deputations. And then we, of course, there will be time for discussion by members that will take us at least 3 hours. And then, of course, there are new developments in terms of H7N9. There's a case in Dongguan. So do we need to suspend the supply of chickens from Dongguan? So we've asked the administration to also brief us at the November 19th meeting what they're doing, whether they have inspected the chicken farms, and what about the agreement of transporting chickens to Hong Kong. So we will give the administration some time to give a briefing, and then we'll allow time for questions. That's a new item that I just added to that meeting. So for the 19th meeting, I think we'll need 3.5 hours, because there are 42 deputations. So 3 hours for the columbarium and niches, and then for the remaining half hour, we'll ask the administration what they're doing in terms of the latest developments of avian flu. So members note we need to have a quorum for a special meeting. So members, if you have indicated that you'll be attending, please do come along, and of course other members are also welcome to join. Visits by this panel. When the Deputy Chair met with the administration, we mentioned that there are many new members in this panel, and where we may be interested to find out more about the work of this panel. So I've talked to the Deputy Chairman. Perhaps there are 2 places worth visiting. We'll ask the Secretariat to liaise with the administration to make arrangement for members to visit the New Territories North Animal Management Center in Shengshui. This will allow members to learn more about the work of animal quarantine, inspection, and animal management work by the Agriculture, Fisheries, and Conservation Department. Because later on, there will be an item to deal with stray dogs, the capture, neuter, and return pilot project. So we want to see whether they have traps that are not humanitarian, because we've heard views about that. So we will take a look. We'll go and visit and see what they do. Another place that we should visit perhaps is the Mengkam-To border crossing. The fruits, live animals, and live poultry and so on are being imported from mainland. So what about the inspection of such animals and food items? So I will again liaise with the administration to see if when a visit could be arranged, and we could all go and observe the operation there. Now, members, if you believe there are other places that the panel should visit, please let us know anytime. You could tell the Secretariat. If there's nothing else, let's go to the agenda proper. The first discussion item, fisheries, Sustainable Fisheries Development Fund. Can we invite the administration in, please? Members, please note that there are funds, issues involved. So in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, members may not move any motion or amendments on matters in which they have direct or indirect pecuniary interest. And if members wish to speak, they have to declare the disclosed nature of the interest involved. So if I may remind members, if there are direct or indirect pecuniary interests in this issue, members should disclose the nature of the interest before the start of discussion. There are 3 fishermen groups which have submitted submissions to us. These are tabled for you, members. Now, if I may invite Dr. Tuen Mun, Secretary for Food and Health, to quickly take us through this paper. Okay, the salient points, Dr. Ko. Madam Chair, members, this paper is on the Sustainable Fisheries Development Fund. In the 2013 policy address of the Chief Executive announced the establishment of a $500 million development fund. This is to help fishermen to consider sustainable and high-value added approaches, and this is to improve the competitiveness of the entire industry. Now, so how we could we should go about this fund. We've listened to the views of various parties, Committee on Sustainable Fisheries, and also various fishermen groups. In the June panel meeting, we've also consulted members on your views. Now, we have collected various views, as I mentioned, and now we have worked out the details of the fund. And so we're here to report back to you. Now we have gone by the recommendation of the Committee on Sustainable Fisheries. It was set up some time ago, and then the committee has proposed banning trawling activities in Hong Kong waters since December 2012. We're now doing registration for fishing vessels, and we also ban non-local fishing vessels from engaging in trawling activities in Hong Kong waters. We're also making preparations for the fisheries protection area so that we could protect important fish nursery and spawning grounds in Hong Kong waters. We want to help local fishermen to enhance their skills and knowledge. We have various workshops, seminars and so on to help fishermen to switch to sustainable fishing operation and so on. Some time ago, we reviewed the relevant policy, and in a number of mariculture zones where we're going to issue new licenses as a pilot project. And in taking and launching this series of measures, we believe it is also the right time for us to review another important measures in promoting the modernization of the fisheries industry. Proposing the Sustainable Fisheries Development Fund, the whole purpose is to promote the modernization of the fishing industry. This will enhance the competitiveness of the trade, and fishermen will then be able to make a living and face challenges brought about by the changing environment. Now, and then with development in the fishing industries, it will provide job opportunities for the fishermen population. It will also provide fresh and wholesome food for Hong Kong people. And in the long run, it will help to preserve the natural ecology, the ocean ecology in Hong Kong. Now we have suggested the areas in which the stakeholders could make use of the fund. For example, in South China Sea, exploring new opportunities. In Hong Kong, they could develop sustainable practices for fishing operations and aquaculture, mariculture activities. And then they could also monitor and enhance fisheries resources. We believe the funds could help the industry to develop in this direction. For the applicants of the fund, these should be bodies incorporated in accordance with the laws of Hong Kong, i.e. there has to be a Hong Kong connection for these bodies. And then for the projects or research projects they propose, these projects should help the development of the fisheries industry and also enhance its competitiveness. For the day-to-day administration management of the fund, this will be undertaken by the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department. The director of the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation would be the controlling officer. He will decide on the disbursements of funds and the advice of the advisory committee. And the advisory committee will make recommendations to the director in respect of the overall strategy, the allocation of funds, and the approval of projects. A vetting committee will also be set up under the advisory committee to consider and vet funding applications against assessment criteria. We hope very much that in December 2013 we could submit a proposal to the Finance Committee. And before we make any this final decision, we'd like to hear your views. If the Finance Committee gives a green light, we hope that in the first quarter of 2014 we'll be able to appoint the Advisory Committee so that in the first half of 2013 we could start receiving applications. We hope that in the year 2014 to 15 we will be able to disperse the first batch of funding. Perhaps I'll stop here and I'll listen to your views. Thank you.
I just saw that members who have raised their hands to speak, Mr. Stephen Ho, Wong Kwok Hing, Kwok Ka-Kay, Claudia Mo, Mr. Christopher Chung. Any other members wishing to speak on the subject? If that is the case, 4 minutes first, including questions and answers. If necessary, we'll have a second round. Mr. Stephen Ho first. Thank you, Madam Chair, followed by Wong Kwok Hing. Well, finally, the Secretary is here to talk about the Development Fund. The fund was supposed to serve as a relief measure because of the ban on trawling activities. But then the appeal for the trawling has not been handled or concluded yet. So I hope that the Secretary can talk more to the fishermen's associations later. Okay, we'll turn back to the Development Fund. I've heard views from the various districts that the fishermen are very enthusiastic about the fund. It's going to be $500 million and is a long-awaited sort of measure for them. There have been so many unfair measures against the fishermen, and this fund can serve as sort of compensation. So my email has been sort of filled with suggestions from the fishermen on the ways that the government can help them in the future. There are two major concerns from the fishermen, including the opinions listed in the 3 submissions tabled today. First, the fishermen associations, in terms of their capital resources, people network, they are at a sort of weak position. So for organizations which are experienced or skilled in applying funding, then they would dominate the fund. So then the fund will be sort of monopolized or dominated by them, and the fund will be solely used for protecting the marine resources, and that departs from the policy intention of the fund. So my question is, how are you going to strike a balance? How can you make sure that the fund can really help the sustainable development of the fishery sector? Second is on the vetting procedures. How can you make balanced decisions? And that hinges on the composition of the advisory committee. What is the percentage of members in the advisory from the fisheries industry on the advisory committee? Secretary, please. In our specific proposals, we advocate the establishment of an advisory committee, and then beneath it, that would be a vetting mechanism. Of course, the operation will be undertaken by the AFCD. You can tell from the paper that there will be representatives on the advisory committee. The number we propose is quite right. representatives from different sectors will be invited to sit on the committee. I believe that we will have the right mix. In our paper, we have made it clear that there will be a balance of members, and we will be not be tilted towards a certain sector. Let me supplement here that for this development fund, I disagree with Mr. Stephen Ho that this is a kind of compensation for the fisheries industry. This was sort of proposed under the recommendation of the Committee on Sustainable Fisheries. This is a long-term measure. So as far as a ban on trawling, we have another mechanism to serve as compensation. So that this development fund is not meant to be compensation for the ban on trawling. Any projects that would affect the fisheries industry, including the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge and other measures on the ban on trawling, we have a different compensation mechanism. Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stephen Ho is a representative from the sector. I fully support his concern. But it's just that he doesn't have enough time to speak his mind. I'm not going to repeat the points made by Mr. Ho. First, I want the Secretary to pay attention to the fact that now we have this development fund, but if the administration or the other government departments don't support this AFCD plan, even if we have this fund, we may not be able to implement it smoothly. Let me quote a concrete example. In a recent panel meeting of the LegCo, we talked about the Aberdeen typhoon shelter, how it can help the fishermen to transform themselves and revitalize the trade. But then the fish rafts in that typhoon shelter, they want to sort of transform themselves. But then the Marine Department said no. And they are not allowing them to transform it. And they are not allowed to carry passengers on their boats. And the boats are not up to the relevant standards, and so on and so forth. So if other government departments or policy bureaus don't support the AFCD's proposal on the fund, then it won't work. So I hope the Secretary, you can take back this question to the high level of the government to garner support from other policy bureaus for the fund. They should render support to this policy. It's just not a matter for the Food and Health Bureau. It touches on other policy bureaus. For example, the Marine Department, that there is not insufficient space in the water for, say, the boat crews and so on. And also in this fund, you said that there should be a limited company incorporated in Hong Kong. And these are the bodies that can apply. But then the fishermen thought that you can just apply without setting up a company. So that you are falling short of their expectations. And it seems that the fishermen have to do a lot to set up companies before they can apply for the fund. So the several submissions suggest that the government should streamline the procedures and that the government should take the initiative, and then the fishermen should not be required to come up with a proposal and so on. So the scenario that Mr. Ho mentioned is very likely to happen, and i.e. people who are skilled in writing the proposals, who have companies to back them up, they can easily get the funding. So for the fishermen, given their education background, they might not be able to draft the proposals well, and their applications may be rejected. So, Secretary, I really hope that you can expedite the procedures, streamline the procedures, so that the fishermen can really benefit from the fund. I've got some time left for you to answer. Secretary, please. On the policy level, I agree that if there are questions straddling across different policy bureaus, the Food and Health Bureau will definitely coordinate to ensure there is adequate support from other policy bureaus. Let me talk about a concrete example. about fishing vessels cannot meet with present requirements. We have several options. We can ask the other departments to lower their standards, perhaps. But then we know that recently people are very concerned about safety in Hong Kong waters. So the fund can really supply the necessary funds to help the vessels to retrofit so that they can meet with the relevant legislative requirements. Perhaps the Permanent Secretary can supplement as to who are eligible for applying for the fund. Well, we heard members' views for the entire application and vetting procedures. We would make it as applicant-friendly as possible. We know that our targets are the fishermen and the fisheries sector. Well, it's not the case that we have many sort of thresholds or procedures or obstacles in the application process. In para 30 of the paper, say the fisheries cooperatives, non-profit-making fisheries organizations, and social enterprises, and also academic and research institutions can apply. And if these bodies can come forward to apply, I believe that they have already got some legal status already. Madam Chair, I'm so worried that only those who are skilled at writing funding application proposals will get the money, and not the fishermen organizations on the fishery sector. I believe that the administration has heard your views about streamlining the procedures. And then next, Dr. Kwokake, followed by Claudia Mo, 4 minutes each. I support the fund, but then the fishermen associations have written in, and they told us that they don't know how to draft the funding proposals. So the administration, can you tell us how you are going to help these fishermen associations? Also, they have this proposal or suggestion that there should be a research fund set up to nurture or attract new blood into the fisheries sector. The government now encourages aquaculture fisheries and the establishment of fish rafts, but we are now talking about reclamation projects, development of NE, NT, and WNT projects. But all these projects go against what we're talking about here today. So all of us agree that we should have a policy to promote sustainable development of fisheries in Hong Kong. What is this policy? Also, in the past, we found that the fishermen are law-abiding, and some of them, even with a ban on trawling, they still resorted to unacceptable fishing methods. So are there any methods that you resort to encourage law-abiding fishermen to fish in a sustainable manner? I will tackle the second question first. Dr. Kwok talked about other policies like land development policies or environmental protection or conservation policies, which might have conflict with the fund. Well, that's unavoidable, I would say, because we are competing for land and also sea resources. So we strive to strike a balance. For aquaculture fisheries, there are designated areas where these can be carried out. And in the past, we have also presented this proposal to the panel that for some time we've banned the or we put a moratorium on fish culture licenses, but I think that it's time that we review the policy and we can try to issue more licenses. For the third question, perhaps I would defer to the director to answer about the application for the fund. About the we've handled applications for the loan fund. Fishermen also air the views that too much information needs to be filled out. While in the past we explained to the fishermen how to fill out the form, what kind of information should be furnished. So this kind of arrangement can also be used to help fishermen in applying for the sustainable fund. Well, this is a practice which has proved to be effective. As for training, the fishermen all along we've been doing the provided on-the-job training for fishermen and also young people with a fisheries background. They must very often they must come from some bit of a fisher's background before they would join the trade. For example, they apart from operating fishing vessels and how to fish, fishing methods, we also provide training on how to operate sea-based operations, like how to operate recreational fishing and so on. We are also providing training to those who wish to join the trade, apart from training to those on the job. Do you have any plans to step up training? And also how to encourage or promote a sustainable way of fishing? Secretary or the director, can I be allowed to continue with my answer? As for the Fisheries Study Center or Research Center, all along we have been liaising with research institutions from the tertiary sector on, say, topics like how to produce good fish feed or fish fries. As to whether the plans can be expanded, we will constantly monitor the progress and whether we can strengthen our collaboration with these research institutions to promote the development of the fisheries industry. As to how to further promote the growth of the fisheries industry, in the study report by the Committee on Sustainable Fisheries released in 2011, we have a very clear blueprint. We are already proceeding with the recommendations in the report, including, firstly, improving the water resources in Hong Kong, and we've imposed a ban on trawling. We've also proceeded with the registration system for local vessels. We hope to control the fishing effort in Hong Kong, and also we seek to help the fisheries industry. And recently, we have reviewed the moratorium on fish culture licenses, and we are proceeding with the pilot program in 3 fish culture zones to issue new licenses to fishermen to engage in aquaculture fisheries. We have also reviewed the Fisheries Development Loan Fund and try to lower the threshold for the application of the loan. We've received many applications recently, especially from those fishermen affected by the trawl ban. They have applied for fund to improve their fishing vessels so that they can travel to offshore areas to do fishing. Well, thank you, Dr. Lang. So, well, I'll be very strict on the timing on 4 minutes. The fund will be overseen by the AFCD in the future. Now, Ms. Claudia Mo, followed by Mr. Christopher Chung.
In the public gallery, we have fishermen's representatives. I've helped them protest, attend meetings for so many times. I hope Secretary will note that they have a banner in black and white. The Aquaculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department has no regard for the law. First, you say you ban trawling, okay, they'll accept it because it's for the good of the marine habitat, but they didn't get any compensation. And it's just at your whim what's the criteria. One day is like this, another day is like that. And when they ask how come this person's got compensation, the other hasn't, then you say it's privacy. Now, $500 million, and it didn't come from you, the initiative. The chief executive just said, well, okay, put in $500 million. It's not a large sum. It's not a small sum either. Now you say you talk to them about sustainability, modernization, and so on. But then these fishermen believe that they are not part of the political circle. That's why the FCD has excluded them altogether. They are banned from trawling activities and they don't get a dime in compensation. Now you talk to them about sustainable development. Now, having heard the Secretary just now, it causes me even more concern. That is, in future, there will be a committee. Under the committee, there will be a vetting subcommittee or mechanism or whatever. Of course, it's still to be managed by the AFCD, and that sends shudders down my spine. So you're doing it again. Now, the fishermen apply for compensation. You deny them compensation, and then you say there's a compensation mechanism, and there is no. Then for the appointment to the committee, there's no time limit. They're talking about an urgent problem. So this $500 million is just to show people there's a blueprint. It's just to show that you're concerned about the fisheries industry. At the end, it will just become a tourism project or a green project and so on. What about the fisheries industry? Where would they be heading for, Secretary? You know, this whole thing is really a hypocrisy, if you ask me. Ms. Mo seems to be talking about the banning of trawling in Hong Kong waters. And after the policy was launched, we have a compensation proposal, and that seems to be what Ms. Mo is talking about. Now, we've explained that to the panel at other meetings, and this proposal was passed by the Finance Committee. Of course, subsequently, we heard a lot of different views about the original proposal. People asked what the criteria were, and there were various views expressed. In any case, that's a proposal endorsed by the Finance Committee, and so we must therefore go by that proposal. Sorry, there are huge loopholes in the implementation of the proposal. The proposal itself is fine. Don't try to blame it on Lesko as if it's Lesko who's made a mistake. No, it's rather that there are human errors in the implementation. Well, that compensation fund is a separate subject. That's why I'm asking him. This $500 million fisheries development fund, is it not a sincere project? If you just ask me to ask the last question, the answer, of course, is no. Anything else? Yes, I would like to supplement. Now, whenever people apply for compensation or whatever, under any such mechanism, we would always expect some who feel aggrieved. That's why there's an appeal mechanism, always. And the appeal mechanism is beyond the control of the AFCD. All members are appointed by me. And because there is a large number of appeal cases, we have increased the number of members and chairmen, because we want to make sure that we could deal with those appeals as soon as possible. That's to respond to the demands of the fisheries industry. We're talking about hundreds of appeal cases. And for the appellants, many have legal background, so I cannot agree. No, Madam Chair, that he's not telling the whole truth. Of course, the appeal mechanism is independent, and members are appointed by the Bureau. But then all the information is provided by the department, and when the fishermen, well, they can't really express themselves properly, or they accept that, or they just cry and complain, and so people send them out, and it's really unfair. So for that mechanism, appeal mechanism, I think you have to look at that again. But for these $500 million fund, is there any mechanism to make sure that it would really help the sustainable development of fisheries? That's all she's trying to say. And next, Mr. Christopher Chung, to be followed by Mr. Raymond Wong. Mr. Chung. Now, as some members pointed out, the fishermen groups say that some fishermen may have difficulties applying for the fund, or they may not even know where to start. But we cannot exclude anybody from applying. There are many parties involved in the fisheries industry. There are commercial organizations or big organizations. They may lead the new development of fisheries, and the advancement of the fisheries. But if we just leave it to fishermen alone, maybe is negating effort. So that it has to be complementary, the various projects, that is. But then you have to perhaps divide the fund for different groups of applicants. If you look at all the applicants in one same batch, of course, people who know how to fill in forms, people with strong commercial background will get the approval. Because they are applying for different things. As you mentioned, there could be many different projects. If it's South China Sea development, then maybe there will be, the applicants will have to be organizations or groups. For individual fishermen, of course, they may not even want to venture so far out. So there's objective for the fund, and there's a sum available for people to apply for. Now, I've been following fishermen cases for more than 2 decades. Very often when there's money, no one wants to apply for it, or but there are others who are unable to get money too. It's like in the case of South China Sea in the past, you've tried it. Yeah, you say that people should go to South Pacific Ocean to fish for tuna fish, but only 2 or 3 tried it. At the end, they failed too. Now we're talking about long haul traveling to South China Sea. How do you help and protect the people? What about the logistics? How do you help them with the sales network and so on? Is there a set of guidelines already on the part of the AFCD to help the fishermen? If not, because none of us know anything about it except Mr. Stephen Ho, who is of course very familiar with this. But then maybe they tried it, but actually it didn't work out. So what about in local waters? You know, how much space do we have for sustainable development? Many of the waters are either sea channels or river channels, that people can't fish there. And if those are not fishing grounds, then very often that's dumping, or if they're not the marine channels, then there's dumping. So, and then there are other places where people engage in unlawful trawling, and you don't have enough capacity. Not like on the mainland, they have special fishermen police to catch these people, and the marine police say they don't have time for this, it's not part of their job. Or maybe even you are guilty in doing trawling, because for whatever scientific experiments people conduct, you shouldn't destroy the marine habitat, and you should only be collecting data for 1 to 3 years, and you should stop. And after you've stopped, you should no longer damage the seabed, because if you damage the seabed, how do people engage in sustainable development? Have you ever considered it? And the fish culture industry, the biggest problem is with labor. Where do you find the workers? And even on land, people could be doing agriculture, but what about the labor and the land involved? I've been on these advisory committee on aquaculture fisheries. I've been the chairman of the committee. All along, the problem's been that we couldn't find people to do the work, and the land belongs to the government, and the people have dug the fish ponds, and they can't do it. Mr. Cho, you won't allow the secretary any time to answer the questions. Well, everyone's taken up 6 minutes or so. Secretary. Well, a lot of the views could be taken on board. If I could just respond quickly to 1 or 2 points. Firstly, how do we make it easy for fishermen, whether they know how to apply and so on? Perhaps we could consider conducting classes or seminars to teach them how to submit an application. And in places like Nansha, what sort of support could we offer? I understand for some fishermen, yes, they do need our support in some way, like a protection, or where they could go, where they can't. Yes, we could give them support there, but I believe there will still be some fishermen who are interested in going fishing there. I think this fund could help them. Mr. Raymond Wong's not here. Mr. Wu Chi-wai to be followed by Mr. Tommy Cheung. Thank you, Madam Chair. The title of the paper is Sustainable Fisheries Development Fund. So my question is, would there be a benchmark study on the fisheries habitat? So this fund is targeted in a way, in other words. That means you have regard to the actual situation in Hong Kong and the development of fisheries here, and see whether we can support the development of fisheries. For example, ocean-going trawling. Will someone do it? Can it actually be done? What sort of support do they need? And then another member mentioned the fish culture industries and so on. I think you have to be specific. When we're talking about sustainable development, what is the scope that we have in mind? And have you done any SPANMARSH studies?
Now, do we have the relevant human resources? Some fishermen told us, and also on the television, that there is no new blood or young people joining the industry, and that is going to affect what we talk about when we talk about sustainable development. Well, or else then the fund will be open for application by relevant people or even non-related people. So I hope that the administration can tell us how is the ecosystem faring now in Hong Kong, and how is the fund going to support the development of the fisheries industry sustainably? What is the direction for future development? Thank you, Mr. Wu. The study, as you mentioned it, might not be a formal one, but then we did a review several years back, and that was done by the Committee on Sustainable Fisheries. We have an overall or comprehensive plan. Well, perhaps I would recap. First is protection. Is protection of our limited fishery resources, and that includes the ban on trawling in Hong Kong waters, and also we have to limit the fishing effort and by registering local fishing vessels. So after we protect our water resources, what else can we do? First is to promote the aquaculture fisheries, and also in Hong Kong waters, trawling is not allowed, but then we can use more sustainable fishing methods which don't do much damage to the environment. Now, as for offshore fishing, we focus on the South China Sea or beyond to Nansha. And in the past, fishing vessels in Hong Kong seldom went to these waters to fish. But then there are rich pelagic fisheries resources in these waters so that we can support. And then the third is about recreational fishing. We want to support that as well. So in the past few years, we've done some work on those fronts. And we've also focused or pay attention to fish feed. And can we turn the food waste into fish feed? And also fish nurseries and spawning. We also devote efforts into that. I agree with you saying that human resources are limited, but it's all a chicken and egg situation. Well, if we got the right conditions, people may be attracted to the trade. Now, next is Mr. Tommy Chen, followed by Mr. Raymond Wong. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, after reading through your paper, well, it would be difficult to object to such a fund, although I did want to do so. Now, I see that you've got a lump sum here. It's not a big amount. Now, if we are really to do concrete work, the fund is not too big. You've listed a list of issues here, but I don't see your focus. I agree with efforts being paid on fish feed, and sometimes you have to purchase fish feed from overseas. And we can produce fish feed in factories apart from in the sea. So if you come to the FC for funding in order to avoid members filibustering on the matter, can you give us a clearer picture on how the money is going to be spent and how long the fund will last? The Fisheries Marketing Organization has has a big budget, but where does that budget, where is the money in that budget spent? Should we be enlarging that budget and do more work on that front instead of establishing a fund separately? I really don't see what you're really driving at. You have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H points. It's like taking exam in our certificate of education examination. We don't want to have an H grade back then. I don't really see how you are going to promote the development of the fisheries industry through this fund. Can you give us a concrete example? And you are not just sitting there waiting for people to apply for the funding. And a lot of people told us that they don't know how to make the application. And people may not give you the tax receipt after they have used the fund for the funding project. And I'm just afraid that you may come up with another white elephant, and you are spending the money and not in an effective way. Mr. Wong Yong-kan is not here today, or rather he's not in the LegCo, and he will be very infuriated if he should be here. Actually, the fisheries industry is directly connected to the catering industry, my sector. So we want this fisheries sectors to develop well, because a lot of Hong Kong people do like eating fish. But I want to support this fund, but I don't really see you coming up with good justifications on why $500 million and not a larger sum. So, Secretary, well, can you be clearer on the figures? I hope that Mr. Tommy Cheung can appreciate that this is not something out of our own imagination. Several years back, the Committee on Sustainable Fisheries conducted a review on the challenges faced by the fisheries sector. They did a good review and came up with comprehensive proposals. First is protecting the fisheries resources, and then diversified development can follow. And they've come up with a package of very comprehensive proposals on how to further develop fisheries industries. Well, let me set the example of recreational fishing. In the past few years, the director already said that we've done a lot of training. And also we've got some development work on how the recreational fishing models can develop. And if fishermen want to turn to do recreational fishing, we must help them. Say some fishing vessels might not meet with the requirements of the marine legislation if they want to carry passengers, so they might have to do some retrofitting to their fishing vessels. So, Secretary, Mr. Cheung's question is really on how you came up with a figure of $500 million and not any other amount. Okay, on this part, I would like to defer to the director to tackle. The Fisheries Marketing Organization does have some revenue. He's going to elaborate on that. So I just want to highlight that we've done all the preparation work before we came up with this fund. And say, going back to my previous example, we need funds to help fishermen to retrofit their fishing vessels. 1 minute, Director, for you. About the FMO, it's because the accumulated surplus is around $100 million, but the operating expenses and income is around $50 million. So the given its existing operation, the FMO is not in a position to promote the sustainable development of the fisheries sector. Now, as for this $500 million fund, we expect that it can cater to the needs of the sector in the next 10 years. So, on average, $50 million per year. we have come up with estimates on various categories. Say, for some categories, it may involve a cost of dozens of millions of dollars, and for some major projects, they may involve $10 million. So we'll try to come up with the best estimates based on our existing information. 20 minutes for myself. Well, can you, if you take the proposal to the Finance Committee, can you break down the $500 million? So if you are going to retrofit the recreational fishing vessels, how much money will be spent? How much money will be spent on developing fish, producing fish feed and fish fries? Can you give us some breakdowns, please, Secretary? Yes, I've heard your views, but then I have some reservation on that. Well, it's really for the applicants to take the initiative to come and apply. And that's the model for the fund. The government should not be breaking down the fund into various categories, or else we will lose our flexibility in administering the fund. Mr. Raymond Wong? Next, that will be the last member. He will be the last member to ask question. Sorry, the mic is not coming through. Sorry, the mic is not coming through. Sorry, the mic is not coming through. There is this Committee on Sustainable Fisheries, as what the Secretary said, and there will be another advisory committee. Then it seems that there is a duplication in the structure. So can the Secretary explain the differences between this new fund and the past funds and also the past structures? This is what I raised in the last meeting on the 11th of June. The government said that it will study in detail how to position the Sustainable Fisheries Development Fund. When we discussed the fund earlier, it seemed that you had no idea on what this fund was all about. Mr. 689 mentioned this in his policy address. He ordered for it to be established in his policy address, and then you had to go along with it, even though the details are not there yet. But then, if the fund is going to help the sustainable development of the sector and to help the sector to adopt a sustainable and high-value added operation mode, then I will support the fund. But I must point out that there is some political element to this fund. In the small circle election for Mr. 689, there were 60 votes from the fisheries sector. Well, all these 60 votes went to Leung Chun-ying. So you are trying to repay you are trying to give some sort of benefits to these people who voted for you. So there is a political element to this fund, I must say. So I'm very worried. You are a politically appointed director and you're a technocrat, but then you shouldn't be considering policies from a political angle. But then your boss gave this order, and I can understand. This fund is going to help fishermen, and it does good, then that's all right. But you should not be paying this debt, so-called debt, political debt of yours. All the 60 votes went to Leung Chun-ying. 44 of the 60 votes from the fisheries and agricultural sector went to the 44 votes from the fishermen went to Mr. Leung, all of them from the fisheries sector. So from a strategic point of view, we should try to preserve the fisheries industry in Hong Kong because of rising costs and rising fuel costs, and the competition from non-local fishing vessels and the implementation of the annual fishing moratorium in the South China Sea. These are all posing challenges to the local fishing industry. They do have a hard time. So if the fund is really going to help fishermen tide over their difficulties, and that would be good. So there might be things that I'm worried about, and there are political factors in the fund. I will support the fund irrespectively, but I want the government to be very clear on the positioning of the fund. If applicants come forward and you reject your applications, will there be an appeal mechanism telling the applicants what are the reasons for their failure? Well, I would like to clarify 2 points first. Mr. Wong said that there was a previous committee, and then for this latest fund, there will be an advisory committee. The previous committee was really looking at the challenges and constraints faced by the fisheries industry, and then it came up with recommendations on a comprehensive policy proposals on protecting fishery resources. Those on the public gallery, please order, please, for those people and the public gallery, or I may have to ask you to leave the chamber or the venue. Well, I think the time is almost up for the discussion of this item. Anything to add from you, the secretaries? Can the security personnel officers try to help to restore order in the public gallery? Secretary, have anything to add? Well, when the previous committee has completed its work and it comes up with recommendations on the directions for sustainable development. Friends on the public gallery, we've heard your views, so please keep quiet. Now, the advisory committee on the fund is really to implement the fund. So the nature of the two committees is different. Well, people may be worried that there will be a duplication. There is also this other fisheries development loan fund. Now, those on the public gallery, perhaps our security officers will ask them to leave. All right, please be brief, Secretary. The fisheries development loan fund, the one existing already, if fishermen have problems with their cash flow, then the fund will come in. But for the Sustainable Development Fund, it's really to encourage fishermen to develop new areas or new fishing modes. And in the initial stage, they may not be able to net a profit. Well, I think we are almost done with our discussion. So I would like to consult members whether you support the proposal to be forwarded to the Finance Committee for scrutiny. No objection? Then the administration, please be prepared to answer more detailed questions on the fund then. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. Thank you, all the government officials. Well, let's move on to the next agenda item. So can perhaps the Secretariat please invite the relevant government team to come into the meeting room. For this agenda item, we've also invited other members of the electrical because it involves the creation of an additional post, and it has to be approved by the establishment subcommittee. So we'll see whether non-panel members are attending the meeting. In the interest of time, Dr. Ko, would you take us briefly through the paper on the FHB's proposal to propose a job for overseeing food safety. There are two branches in the bureau, the food branch and then the health bureau, and then there is one permanent post of the Secretary General, and then there is a supernumerary post which expire in February 2014. But then the food safety covers a wide portfolio, well, after I assumed office, I found that the two portfolios of food and health, and for the food branch, the workload is heavier than the health branch. And in view of the increasing complexity of the work and the heavier workload, so it would not be sufficient to rely on just one deputy secretary to undertake all the work. So because of this, we hope that the panel will support us in creating an AOSGB level at D3 level, a permanent post to deal with food safety problems, or to strengthen the support on the food portfolio, and also strengthen our work in safeguarding food safety and the relevant policy areas. To put it simply, another deputy secretary has to undertake a list of work items, including columbarium, market policy, hawker policy, avian flu policy. I won't waste your time in going down the list. Now, for this other deputy secretary, well, this deputy secretary has a very heavy workload. Now, for the food safety deputy secretary, he has to look at the baby formula, and that will last for quite some time, this issue. And on food safety in the mainland and Taiwan, well, there are new food safety issues every day. So in the long term, we hope to look at the policies from the farm to the table, to the dining table. And actually, a lot of the food in Hong Kong, or a major portion of the food in Hong Kong, is imported from the mainland and other overseas countries. So in our work, we have to liaise with other jurisdictions, including the mainland. We have to work with senior officials from the relevant departments, and we have to exchange views with them. So to make it brief, I hope that members can understand that the food branch has a wide portfolio, and in particular, the food safety. We have to oversee food safety as an important area. We hope that you will support our proposal to create a permanent post. All right, members, Mr. Wong Kwok Hing, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Raymond Chan would like to speak on the subject. 4 minutes, perhaps. Mr. Wong Kwok Hing first. Madam Chair, I support the paper to turn the supernumerary post into a permanent post. I think there are good justifications as far as food safety work is concerned. In paragraph 6 of the paper, it says that we have to make sure that Hong Kong's legislation on food safety is in tandem with international legislation. There's really a need for that. Well, there have been recent reports that the Food and Drug Administration, if in the U.S., that there is a plan to add in the anti-fat or trans fat, to put a ban on the trans fat in food, because the substance is hazardous to people's health. With this be a major direction for the Bureau of Food Safety, with the post look at food safety. Would the post look at trans fat, the issue on trans fat? Yes, my answer is in the affirmative. Perhaps I'll defer to Mr. Chan to say a little bit more. Mr. Chan, under existing legislation, in our food or nutritional food labeling system, trans fat has to be labeled. And that, to a certain extent, can help consumers make choices when they buy food. Secondly, we are joining hands with the industry to encourage them to minimize the use of trans fat, because it is hazardous to people's health. It doesn't do any good to the heart. Thirdly, we also noticed that in the U.S., there has been this latest proposal on the ban. We are now studying it. The Center on Food Safety is looking at it from a scientific angle. As what Mr. Wong said, he is right. Our legislation has to be in line with international legislation. We have to take into consideration other jurisdictions' legislation. We will proactively follow up on the matter. That is going to be part of the work portfolio of this new post. Madam Chair, I support the creation of this post. I have high aspirations for the post. I hope that this, I believe that the Deputy Secretary, this new post, will be under a tremendous pressure. As what the Secretary said, the bulk of the food in Hong Kong is imported from other places. So the Bureau has to keep a close eye on food safety, and there may be new developments every day. So if we've got this new post, that the government should not have any excuses for acting too slowly. Mr. Stephen Ho, followed by Mr. Raymond Chan.
Now, the Secretary said that this is about food safety, this post-creation proposal. Well, if you mentioned that, of course, it's hard for us to oppose it. But as the chairperson mentioned, we're going to go to Man Kam To border crossing to look at food safety, inspection, and so on. That means the public are very concerned about it. I know there's an onerous workload on the part of the Bureau. Just now, the Secretary mentioned major issues like the restriction on export of powdered formula, or avian flu, or market policy. But all these tasks will come to an end eventually. And what do you do then with your work distribution? Then are you going to look at trans fat study as suggested by Mr. Wong Kok Heng? Do you have more examples to share with us? And in Hong Kong, as we heard, most of our food is imported from the mainland or other countries. Would there be any support locally for food safety? What about Hong Kong people running farms in Hong Kong? Do you offer any support? Secretary? Yes, food safety covers a wide array of issues. I think in the past few months we've had plenty of examples. Safety of edible oil, food we consume on the market, and but we have a system to monitor whether there are new issues being raised internationally and whether there are any new food safety incidents internationally. And then for food that's very common, like a vegetable and meat, we have a systematic approach in, say, first removing pesticides. The relevant pesticide legislation, it was passed 2 years ago. But that's not the end of the matter. After the legislation is passed, there are a lot of implementation details. We have to talk to local sector and other sectors outside of Hong Kong, and we have to sort out details before this could commence next August. And then we're also going to look at heavy metal and so on. There are so many issues we're going to look at. So in the near term, I don't see when all these tasks will come to an end. But anyway, perhaps I could also ask the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Shum, to add to my reply. Madam Chair, I don't know if I've got Mr. Ho right. Now, for Hong Kong people running farms on the mainland, I think you're talking about a quality or accredited farm scheme, right? Because many local farmers start farms on the mainland. Now, when Hong Kong farmers start farms on mainland is mostly to supply to Hong Kong. So that would help to ensure food safety to some extent. That's why we've always been encouraging farmers to do that. We do have various measures to help to encourage Hong Kong farmers to start farms on the mainland. Of course, there is need for support from mainland, and we're also keeping liaison with them. A short question, please. Well, yes, increasing the number of staff is one possibility. What about streamlining your procedures? Is that possible too? No, it's not because of in-house needs that we want this extra post. Rather, we need to talk to importing countries or the origin countries. We need to have liaison with them. Of course, for our own internal procedures, we could try to streamline them as far as possible. But then some of the procedures do not originate from us. Mr. Raymond Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. On food safety, Hong Kong and other places would only be demanding more. For example, organic food, Hong Kong lags far behind. We're not doing so well there. So there's no end to such tasks. That's why, on the whole, I support this paper in creating this permanent post. But if the Bureau could take this opportunity to tell us something more. Now, this is not a new post, actually. It's an existing post. It's a supernumerary post for 6 months since August 2013. But before this post was created, who was doing the work? That's my first question. And secondly, as the Bureau consider making it a permanent post, or what about still keeping it as a supernumerary post for 2 years, 4 years, and so on? What are your considerations? Can you give more explanation, please, to the public? I have another question on pet food. Animal welfare is under DS1, and food safety is under DS2. If we talk about pet food in the future, who will be responsible? Dr. Koh or Permanent Secretary? Permanent Secretary. Thank you. Your first question, Mr. Chen. The existing supernumerary post, or rather before this post, who did the work? The answer is that in the past few years, we had a time-limited post. At first, the post was created to deal with food safety legislation. It was still just a bill at the time because there was need to do a lot of consultation with the trade, and there was need to do assessment, the regulatory impact assessment, and so on. That's why at the time we created a time-limited post to handle that task. But after the post was created, apart from the food safety bill, there were various tasks that came about. Mr. Chen actually is the post holder. He has to take care of other legislation-related issues. For example, estrogen in infant formula, food additives, the safety standards, and so on. All such legislation and related work is undertaken by the same post. So the post has been around for 3-4 years. It's just that for the past 6 months it was a supernumerary post. So in the past 4 years or so, in the Food and Health Bureau, we've always had 2 Deputy Secretary to take up such an onerous workload. There's 1, there's 2. Pet food, who's in charge of pet food? If it's DS1, Deputy Secretary 1, he is involved in a lot of policy-related work. So for food safety incident, that's under DS1, and if there's an outbreak, then he has to take care of it. For example, gutter oil incident, or problems with pet food. But perhaps this arrangement is not the best. Because when it comes to food, there should be the same colleague in charge of it, both incidents and safety standards. So if we're able to create this post, we hope that the relevant colleague could deal with all issues: food safety incidents, food safety standards, and exchanges with the mainland. And you asked another question, whether it can't be, how come the post can't be for just 2 or 3 years? As the Secretary pointed out at the beginning, food safety issue is an ongoing battle, you can say, because there are always new developments, and our diet change, eating habit change. So this is an ongoing challenge. So we can't see how this could be just a time-limited post. And on pet food, we have studied the issue, but we're still in the early stage of our study. And we will look with the AFCD to look at international trend, and then we'll see what we should do in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Permanent Secretary, can you clarify for this new post? So this the DS will focus on food, and there is no other Deputy Secretary who will be involved in food, right? So this is a new post. As for pet food, then that would be under the portfolio of DS1. For example, avian flu, the Secretary said that avian flu is under DS1. So the PAS under him will shoulder the responsibility, that work portfolio. As for the supply of animal food, then that will be under the DS1 too. Mr. Tommy Zhang next, and then followed by Dr. Kokaki. Madam Chair, I'll be brief. I don't think the Secretary likes what I'm going to say. When Dr. Yok Chow was in his post, he had 3 work portfolios: medical, welfare, and health. And then welfare was taken away from him. And then he's got 2 work portfolios, and then another permanent secretary was added. So my question for the secretary is this: do you think our civil servants' efficiency is declining, or is it true that we have increased workload? Now you've got such a lengthy paper, and there are so much work portfolios listed, but then a lot of the works listed here duplicate with that of the Center for Food Safety. You mentioned somewhere also about liquor licensing, and it seems that you are trying to phase out the liquor license holders. We don't issue any more liquor licenses. Why are you proposing adding a post to deal with liquor licensing? I understand that this position has been contracted out for some years, and then you bring forth a list of work or job duties which the person has to take on, but actually a lot of the work is being undertaken by other people as well. So is it that the civil servants, their efficiency is very low these days? Well, pardon me for not providing information or comment on the last term or the work of the last term of government, but since I assumed my office, I must say that the civil servants team, well, in 2 aspects, they have been doing they have worked diligently, and they pour their hearts into their job. Now, on the policy level, we want to be proactive in driving through some policies. But then for the civil service team, they have the duty to remind us that there might be negative impact to certain policies. Irrespectively, the civil service team in my bureau will try to work in tandem with the policy that we are drawing up. Now, given such an onerous workload, I would not criticize our civil service team for not being efficient. I've been chasing them very often through emails on progress. Well, let me be frank. I think the civil service team is very dedicated and very diligent and efficient. I thank them and I admire their work. Well, I agree with you that most of the team is efficient, dedicated. So given such a great efficiency and dedication, I don't see the need for the creation of this new post. I have great reservations on the proposal. Well, I beg to differ from Mr. Zhang on his point. 2 to 3 years earlier, because of this major piece of legislation, we created a new post. So because this is just a piece of legislation, then a time-limited post was created. But then during the interim period, so much has happened, and then this colleague has to undertake a lot of additional work. So although the work on the legislation has now been completed, there is still so much follow-up work to do. So we are not saying adding one additional extra post. It's just trying to regularize a time-limited post now. We need this person to lead the work in this area. Next one is Dr. Kwokake, followed by Dr. Joseph Lee. I agree that the government, or I support the government's putting heavier emphasis on food safety. I want to talk about the implementation of the Import and Export General Regulation. This is a short-term work. As many colleagues point out, we don't need a permanent post for that. In your paper, you've listed a list of duties which are ongoing works. Is there any area of work which is new and which has not been implemented yet, and which the Bureau thinks is important, like the heavy metal or veterinary drug residues in food? Apart from these two areas, are there other new areas which have to be embarked on and which need the post? So I think we should have a long-term arrangement, because we are talking about public money. I hope the government should be prudent. And I noticed that a lot of the duties listed here have to do with the Center for Food Safety. And I think experts are needed to deal with these duties. Apart from AOs, experts are needed. So in the Center for Food Safety, how many experts are there to deal with food safety, medical staff, and so on? When it comes to food safety, we don't want to see the situation that there is a senior person leading the team, but then nobody beneath him to support him. So are there any experts backing up the food surveillance projects or programs? I'll tackle the second part first. The Center for Food Safety is reviewing on an ongoing basis their staff establishment and experts' needs, and there is a resource allocation exercise every year. And every year we ask the Center for Food Safety to raise requests for additional manpower. In the past few years, the CFS has reviewed its establishment. Now, as for the experts, it is a diversified team. We have got vets there. We have doctors, general practitioners there. We have health supervisors there as well. So it's a very diversified team, and they enjoy good status internationally, or good reputation internationally. The international community has high regards for our team. in Hong Kong. So can the administration supplement with a paper on all this information, and what are your plans in the next few years, and how you are going to support with the experts supporting this new post?
Dr. Kokaki is concerned whether there are enough experts. No. I think for their first task, I think they have to see whether there is a need for this to keeping this post. No, she hasn't. They haven't answered my question. No, they say they're going to give you information in writing because we're running out of time. Perhaps a quick reply, and then Mr. Chen could also add a few words. As it was mentioned earlier, on food safety, you can say it's ongoing task because things are getting complicated, and also for Hong Kong, over 90% of our food is imported from various parts of the world, so we have to keep track of the development trends all over the world. As for new tasks, or whether we haven't talked about in the paper, there's mention of claims, food claims, the effects they have. So these are really complex issues and very controversial. And even if we just need to do a study, it may take several years already. And then also on food safety, we're talking about veterinary drug residue, heavy metal. We also look at shellfish toxins, so we're doing some studies in these areas, but because these studies still at an early age, that's why we don't think we should include in the paper at this early stage. That's all. Mr. Chen, if I could just add, Madam Chair, perhaps some of the issues Dr. Kwok might remember. For example, food labeling for infant formula. It's true, in March this year we came to LegCo, we got your support, Dr. Kwok also supported, but then for this task we still have to draft the relevant legislation, and there are a series of follow-up actions to see, for example, we to monitor compliance by the trade, and we have to make sure the laboratory is able to test the contents in formula milk as claimed, and all such work takes time. We may come back next year. Now, Dr. Kwok might say this is not new. You know about it already, but by the time the legislation could be put in place and the system put in place, there's still quite a bit of work to do. Dr. Joseph Lee and Ms. Alice Mack. This is the item on the post-creation. Are you on this item? Well, I'll draw the line there. So 3 colleagues. Dr. Joseph Lee, 4 minutes, please. The post. This is just to turn a supernumerary post into a permanent one. It's a D3 post. So my question for the administration is this. Now, if this becomes a permanent D3 post, then there's a whole team working for him, those who've been working for him for the past 6 months. Of course, you don't need to seek funding from us, but for this whole team, after you've created this post, maybe there are other civil service posts that you have to make permanent or provide to support the Deputy Secretary, because one person alone can't do all the work, but there's actually a whole team involved. So my first question is whether the posts in this team will be made permanent posts as well, and how many people do you need in addition to support the work of the Deputy Secretary, and how much is involved there? Secretary? At this stage, we don't see the need to add many other colleagues after making this post permanent. Just for the DS post as a secretary. Well, I find that strange. I still have over 2 minutes. Several months ago, when this paper came to us, I asked a similar question. Now, I find it strange. Now, you have a head of the team. There's no one underneath to help to do the work. And then you're just creating senior posts, and you don't have junior posts to support senior posts, and people will criticize you. I'm not against creating the D3 post, but are you telling me after you create the D3 post, you're not adding other posts beneath? And if that's the case, it's strange. Well, because as they said, this is already an existing post. They're just turning it into a permanent post. Please, you don't need to give explanation on their behalf. My question is straightforward. Now, this is about changing a supernumerary post to a permanent post. And at the operational level, there are civil service posts. Do any of these supernumerary posts need to be made permanent? Of course, we don't need to approve funding, but I want to seek the information. Secretary, the answer is no. But I follow what Dr. Joseph Lee is saying. Now, in the civil service, this is a senior post, of course. We're just enhancing senior level leadership at the policy-making level. And at the working level, I agree with Dr. Joseph Lee. I see what you mean, but then there's no need to add any operational staff at that level yet. Next, Ms. Alice Mack. Madam Chair, I support the post-creation. I see that for DS1, DS2, the focus will be on food. For DS1, the focus will be on policy. I think the division of work is about right. For DS2, a lot of members mentioned food safety, but I also noticed a point in the paper. Food supply. Adequate food supply is important as well, but then all along we focused on food safety. And we haven't considered food supply, for instance, live cattle. Now we're just talking about cattle. What about other food supply? How can we ensure there is adequate food supply? Because that affects commodity prices. If there is a new post to oversee this policy, I think some work needs to be done quickly so we know how we could ensure an adequate supply of food, and then commodity prices won't soar further. And now if we have an additional DS post, food, of course, we attach great importance to that. And there's another area of great concern to me and to Mr. Stephen Ho is about our agriculture policy. And now it's a Band-Aid approach. But then when we have a new development, we always ask the government what is agricultural policy is, but the government could never say. Oh, so you have a new post here. I think the whole needs to hand in homework. And what about animal welfare and pet welfare? The council meeting last week, we also asked what legislation needs to be reviewed. Perhaps in the past you don't devote so much attention to such issues. I hope you're able to hand in your homework on these tasks sooner after you create a post. On agricultural policy, we have started looking at it. I think in the near term, we should be able to come back to LegCo to brief you. Next, Mr. Raymond Wong. Thank you, Madam Chair. Originally, this is a supernumerary post for 6 months, Deputy Secretary, D3. At the time, you made it a complaint. You've imposed it on us because the person's been doing the work. In 1st of August, you did it through delegation transfer of authority, and then you make it a supernumerary post. Now you want this post to become permanent. Okay, you've given reasons. Let's look at the justifications. The export restriction of infant formula, that's only a temporary measure. When supply resumes normal, then you will lift the restriction. So for the export restriction of infant formula, that task is more or less finished. At the moment, you don't see any extra work. So there's not much work involved on that issue. And the food safety, a lot is mentioned here. 2011, the plasticize issue involving Taiwanese beverages food, and then we have the guttural issue in 2013 in Taiwanese food. That's another problem. And then New Zealand, August case, contamination of food. Now, all these incidents were reviewed by the foreign media. If you ask me, you haven't done your job properly. And now you want money to create a post. But you might say, okay, the post been around for 6 months. That's because you have imposed it on us. You've made it a fait accompli. And so you're just going through the motion now. You still have to go to the establishment subcommittee. And then paragraph 5, the policy on columbarium, niche, how come is under the food branch? I find it odd. And then Annex 5, you look at the organization chart of the food branch. You find that there's top-heavy, the structure. Permanent secretary, bracket food, there are 2 deputy secretaries, D4 and D3 posts, respectively. And then there are 3 principal assistant secretary at D2 levels. Under the permanent secretary, there are 5 persons between D2 and D4 levels. Now you want to add another deputy secretary, foot 2. That's why I think you're expanding the top level excessively. Why do you need so many directorate officers? Of course, you can answer me. These are just my queries. But can I suggest this? Consider extending the supernumerary post for another 6 months. Let's see how things go next year, and then we'll let you create this post, okay? Secretary? On Mr. Wong's question. Now, I don't agree with to everything he said, but I agree on the name. It's true in the Food and Healthcare Bureau, the food branch takes charge of more than food issues. I agree, the name may not be exactly right, but I'm afraid in a bureaucracy, when there's division work, this sort of problem is bound to happen. It is hard for a name. You're talking about a food branch. Please let the secretary answer. So you have food and non-food together. So it's hard to reflect all the work of branch by its name. Food safety, food supply, columbarium is just one other non-food issue. What about environmental hygiene, agriculture and fisheries policy? Well, agriculture and fisheries policy, you may say that's related to food. Market, hawkers. This is a major area of work as well. So I agree with Mr. Wong. The name may not be descriptive enough, but that's to let you know how onerous the workload is. Yes, of course, I understand it. I pointed out just to play with words. And then secondly, you give people the impression, okay, this is food branch, but under the permanent secretary food, there are 5 directorate officers. So that's ballooning at the top level. And even if you need so much manpower, you have to explain it to the people. As you said, the food branch also looks after columbarium policy, markets, and so on. They look after many different issues. Then you have to make that clear to people. Or maybe in future, you might even have to consider changing the name. If we could come up with a good name, or someone has come up with a good suggestion. Yeah, and we don't have to change the name of the bureau to include 10, 20 words. I'll support it. I keep an open mind anyway. And as I pointed out at the beginning, after I joined the government, something took me by surprise. I think you could see it too in the issues I dealt with. I probably spend more time on food branch related business than in the other branch. So you mean you don't have to take care so much of healthcare issue? Well, is a lot happening. Of course, sometimes we take the initiative to do some work, but at the same time we also have to react to developments. Well, I think I have to stop you, Secretary. It's almost time. Finally, I'll just say this. You do more testing and certificates, do more quickly, do the work certification testing more quickly, so to avoid incidents and do it better and do it more efficiently. So that's all I'll suggest. I think we have spent quite enough time on this item. Before we conclude discussion here, can I ask members whether you support the government's proposal to create a permanent post of Administrative Officer Staff Grade B in the food branch of the Food and Healthcare Bureau to deal with food safety and other issues? Do you agree the item be referred to the Establishment Subcommittee? I propose just extending the supernumerary post by another 6 months. They should come back next year to make it a permanent post. Okay, members, is there any objection of referring the item to the ESC? No? Then, Bureau, can you take it up with the ESC?
Okay, the last agenda item is just past 4:15. Originally, we planned to end the meeting at 4:30. The next agenda item is about tackling the problem of proliferation of flies in the Tuen Mun district in Ha Pak Nai. How many members would like to raise questions? Please raise your hands. Ms. Alice Mack, Mr. Stephen Ho. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. Okay. For the Establishment Subcommittee, I have to say whether this panel supports the proposal or not. Yes, we support the proposal. All right. Can the Secretariat please invite the relevant government officials to for this item, for the upcoming item? The next agenda item is of on proliferation of flies. Ms. Alice Mack, myself, Mr. Stephen Ho, Michael Tan, any other member? I will be the last one to speak. If members agree, let's extend the meeting by 15 minutes until 4:45. Is that all right? Any objection? If not, then we will first welcome officers from the Environment Bureau who is here today. Perhaps we'll ask Mr. Christopher Wong from the Food and Health Bureau to take us through the paper. There have been a problem about flies in Tuen Mun. Do the flies come from the landfill, or are there any other problems? Mr. Wong, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me update members on the latest situation. In early October, FEHD was informed of the problem of fly proliferation in a number of areas, and together with other relevant government departments, we made inspections in these areas. We hoped to find or identify the source for the flies, and we tried to step up the cleansing and preventive work. Now, on the various different regions, I will want to focus first on the several estates in Tuen Mun. On the 8th, 9th, and 10th of October this year, the FHD conducted investigations in the Lunking Estate, Samson Estate, and Butterfly Estate markets. The Link manages these markets, so we gave advice to the Link staff on how to prevent proliferation of flies. The administration also asked the Link to remind market store operators to take proper preventive work. Later on, our staff reviewed the conditions of the markets, and we found that there has been improvement in the situation. Recently, we also visited these markets, and we did not find any obvious signs of fly infestations. The Housing Department, in response to our request, also closely monitors the hygienic conditions of its public rent housing estates in the Tuen Mun district. If needed, they will also be stepping up their cleansing work to improve the hygiene of the estates. Well, the second region is Ha Pak Nai Chun Yuen Long. FHD staff carried out inspections on the 11th, 17th, and 18th of October, respectively in Ha Pak Nai Chun Yuen Long and the vicinity of potential fly breeding grounds, including channels, gullies, pig farms, and so on. At that time, we didn't find any obvious breeding of flies, but nevertheless, we had arranged the pest control contractors and our pest control team to strengthen fly control work in the villages. We also advised the villagers to properly handle the refuse. And from the 21st and the 29th of October, we returned to the sites, and we didn't find any signs of breeding of flies or fly infestation. The third site is Western New Territories landfill, or Went. FVHD paid visits to the Went landfill together with the EBD colleagues. Paid visits to the landfill. All along, they have been subjected. The Went landfill has been subject to stringent contract requirements, and the landfill contractor has also carried out ongoing pest control work in the landfill. No serious problem has been identified recently, and EBD instantly stepped up inspections with the landfill contractor and discussed with the FHD more effective pest control measures, including more frequent pest disinfestation work. FHD found a significant number of different types of flies. One type is house flies, which mainly breed in household rubbish. The second type is blow flies, which mainly breed in rotten fruits and vegetables, as well as animal feces, and flesh flies, which mainly breed in decaying meat. So they share a common feature. They move about and breed in places where they hatch out. Apart from the places where fly infestations were reported, FHD had identified the following features. The flies in the species of flies in different areas may not be the same, and in areas where proliferation of flies, there were conditions conducive to such proliferation. Thirdly, in Longgutan or areas along Went landfill, we didn't find a particular problem with fly proliferation. Flies usually move about and breed in places where they hatch out. In view of this, the FVHD has no sufficient evidence to suggest that the recent problem of fly proliferation has to do or originates from the Went landfill. In any case, FHD will continue to keep a close eye on the situation, and especially on the refuse collection stations and the markets. We will step out our supervision, and if necessary, we would provide the professional assistance to traders, the link, and EBD contractor. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Members, how many members would like to speak on the subject? Ms. Alice Mack, Mr. Stephen Holt, myself, Mr. Michael Ten, Dr. Kwakaki. Any other members who wish to speak? If not, then 3 minutes for each member. Then I'll draw a line here. Ms. Alice Mack, 3 minutes, including Q&A. Well, in the interest of time, I'll be brief. The FVHD colleagues agree that many more flies are identified or were identified in the areas mentioned, and there are different species. Have you identified any reason why this is the case? Is it because of a deterioration of the environment, or is it because of weather factors, or what? Now, media reports. There have been a number of media reports recently, but apart from that, are you doing any regular inspections? In Tuen Mun district, the problem is not only limited to the markets. Say in villages near Hongshui Q, in the nullahs and gullies near the villages, there are problems of fly proliferation. So how frequent is your control exercises or pest control programs? If you fail to identify the reason for the recent proliferation, are you going to prevent problems from recurring in the future? Say, in markets managed by the link REIT, there are problems. What measures can be taken against the link by the FEHD, apart from helping them to strengthen pest control? My next question is for Dr. Chen. You said that the problem hasn't anything to do with the landfill. So what can you do to clear the landfill of the blame or the impression that it is creating all these problems? Thank you, Madam Chair. About the frequency of inspections by FEHD, I'll defer to the FEHD to tackle that. If problems are identified with the pest contractors or the management companies, what kind of measures they can take, well, that will be dealt with later on. Now, as for the fly proliferation situation recently, in areas around the fly proliferation areas, we find conditions which can of the area which will encourage or allow the flies to proliferate. In markets, that may have to do with blocked drainage systems or nullas. Well, the problem may be very localized. As for our regular inspections, I'll defer to a colleague from the department. Please make it brief, Mr. Sin. Normally, the pest control work undertaken by FEHD is not limited to fly control. Our regular pest control programs cover rodents, mosquitoes, and flies. And we aim to improve the hygiene of the various districts, and we in rear lanes and refuse collection stations and refuse collection points, and we will focus our efforts in those points. Now, as for the link REIT, they will try to cooperate with us, and they also have some management measures which will tie in with the advice given by us, the department. If they're not doing a good job, we can send them advisory letters to ask them to improve the hygiene conditions. Mr. Michael Tien, followed by Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have three questions. First is about this proliferation of flies. The problem is here for 2 months. Have you reviewed the impact on the public? Say whether more people seek consultation services at public hospitals, any increase in the prevalence rate of infectious disease? Second, flies may have a bearing on people's lives. Would you be coming up with some indicators on to measure the level or the quantity of flies? We do have such an indicator for mosquitoes, right? Thirdly, the flies breed on household rubbish, rotten fruits and vegetables, and animal feces and decaying meat and so on. We know basically where they breed. Now, I visited landfill. Well, the landfill takes in exactly these materials or substances. You said that you visited the landfill on the 8th, 11th, and 18th of October. No serious fly infestations were found, but I received a report that there was a person working in that area. And in September, a large number of flies or fly infestations were seen. At that time, FEHD colleague or staff actually took a photo of the fly infestations, but they dared not to speak up for fear of losing his job. Would you be taking a closer look at the situation? Would it be possible that the photos have actually been taken and then the colleagues dare not speak out because of fear of the job? Because all the descriptions you have in paragraph 8, that tie in exactly with the description of a landfill. And actually, when I visited the landfill, the odor problem is so serious, is really nauseating. 3 questions about whether IVHD's staff member has seen in-flight infestations at landfill. Then I will defer to the department colleague to tackle that. Second, about the public health issues connected with fly infestations. To my understanding, diseases caused by flies, cholera, malaria, and food poisoning. When we look at the figures in the past few years, the number of cases has been stable. In the first several quarters of 2013, the statistics compared to the statistics in the past few years, there has not been a rising trend. So the figures or the data have been stable all along. Should we have a fly level indicator? And actually, we are looking at studies of the WHO, whether there are such indicators. As far as we understand, there is an index of a fly infestation, but there has not been a consensus among the experts on the threshold where further action is required. In the absence of such statistics, there will be constraints in coming up with an index or indicator in controlling fly infestations in Hong Kong. We do several types of work, or we look at several aspects. One is the number of complaints, and then also we will be looking at statistics related to public health. And all these will form the basis for our decisions on how to redeploy resources to tackle the problem. Now, in the future, if the WHO comes up with scientifically based indices or action items, we'll be more than happy to consider those. All right, thank you very much. Can you respond to my last question? And what is your last question? Well, from September onwards, photos were taken on the fly infestations in Went landfill.
Well, we have no information at hand of report from staff about such photos or such cases. Would you go back and look into it, and can you try to confirm that, please? If they all said no, well, then I have to trust you, right? Well, when I speak, perhaps I could say something more, because I've seen some flies myself. Mr. Ho? A few days ago, we went with Dr. Chen to the landfill. At that time, I didn't see that the condition was so poor, but definitely. But then, of course, it's 2 months later, and Mr. Ten is right that that's suspected to be the originating site. So I hope the government will go back and check carefully. And then on another point, Mr. Wong said that you went back to the market and saw improvement. Improvement is a bit vague. What sort of improvement do you see? Is it because you no longer saw flies, or because there was a cleansing operation, so situations improved, that's why there are no longer flies? What is it exactly? The third question, the cause is unknown. Maybe because the leftover meat from the meat store, or whether there's poor management on the part of the link, we don't know. Ms. Alice Mack asked what preventive measures you can take, so you have to be more specific. And I asked you a specific question. What if all of a sudden there's another fly infestation? How do you deal with this situation? Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wong? Yes, Madam Chair. Now, about the cause of infestation, as I mentioned, the expert's judgment is where we saw more flies is mostly because near the area there were the right conditions for the breeding of flies. And as I said, in the market, we've seen blocked drains, or the grounds were not cleaned properly. And on the site, we were reminded those in charge to do a better job with that. And when we have revisited the sites repeatedly, so far the message from the frontline officers is that in the past few inspections, they have found things to have improved, and there's a far smaller number of flies now. But we understand there may be still some flies, but definitely the situation has improved compared to the first time when we visited there. But of course, we will keep monitoring the situation. If there should be similar incidents again in future, as I said earlier, next year, when we plan our pest control program, we will bear such data in mind in deployment power and so on. And we'll look at the circumstances and deploy accordingly. That's the workflow we follow. Thank you. On the 13th of October, together with Mr. Stephen Ho, we visited the landfill. On that day, it's true there were not many flies. Then we went to Ha Pak Nai, and we saw quite a large number of flies. So my question is this: when we visited the district, we found out on the 13th of October when we went there, it wasn't the peak of the fly infestation. Maybe you've already taken certain action, so there were already fewer flies, but still there were flies. And from what we heard, there were 2 points. I would like you to verify that. Firstly, there were staff working at the landfill. They said before we visited there, at one point there were a lot of flies. In the staff office, in the staff canteen, they saw flies all over the floor, and they dare not open up their mouth to speak because they were afraid flies would fly into their mouth. So that's how many flies there were. So is it true? That's the first point. Secondly, some also told us they heard that in Nim Wan landfill in Tuen Mun, when it was the peak of the fly infestation, there was a strike by staff at the landfill. They did not clear up the refuse. They did not disinfect the refuse. Could that be one of the reasons why there was a sudden outbreak of fly infestation? Because it was unusual that there was such an increase in number of flies in Ha Pak Nai. So, Dr. Chen, did you check the logbook? Was there any strike during that period by staff? Madam Chair, thank you. We did not hear about that because it was a strike. We should have known, but there was no such record. And perhaps I could take this opportunity to say this. Well, landfill, of course, deals with a large volume of waste. So on spraying of insecticide, we do stringent work there, job there. Now, in places where there's an accumulation of refuse, so for example where animal carcasses are dumped, or where we wash vehicle wheels, in these places every day at the end of the day we would spray insecticide. And of course landfill is huge. At a weighing station, in the office, at the sewage treatment plant, at least once every 2 weeks sprays are administered, and we've already stepped up the spraying, as Patrick pointed out. We do it now 4 times a week. And there has not been a case of a strike by staff, so no spraying was done. Because EPD does have staff stationed at the landfills. If that's the case, our officers would have been affected, but we didn't see such a problem. But of course, we should step up our pest control effort. Dr. Kokaki, the last member. Well, I'm sure it's going to be Rosherman case. According to the FHG, there's no reason why there was a fly investigation. But I think for journalists covering the case, they saw it. You just need to watch the video footage from, and you could see the fly strips were covered with flies. If you still try to, of course, no one's going to admit is a problem originating from the landfill, but I would like the two departments, FHD and PD, to provide some figures before and after the incident. How often would you go to visit, the free housing estates, Samshing, Butterfly, and Lunking estates? FHD, how often do you go and inspect the markets there to check fly infestation, breeding, or mosquito breeding, and so on? And after, are you going to make any pledges, FHD, after this case? The EPD, since Dr. Chen is here, can I ask you this? Would you give any undertaking to step up preventive measures? Could you give us some figures? How, say, give us quantitative figures of how much more work you're going to do. Who's to reply, please, FHD? Thank you, Madam Chair. On the inspection figures, perhaps we could provide them after the meeting. Yes, let us have the figures later on. For each estate, how often do you conduct inspections, for instance? EPD, we've talked to the EPD. The department and the FHD and that we have considered this with EPD. Perhaps there could be new measures at the landfill, so we could monitor the number of flies, whether there's a sudden surge in number. Perhaps I could ask my colleagues to explain what we are contemplating at the moment, and then EPD could supplement FHD. Well, we are now studying this with the EPD at landfill sites. We're going to set up fly monitoring points. So we're going to attract flies to a certain point, and then we'll have some sort of traps to catch the flies. At different locations of the landfill, we will set up such traps, fly traps. And then we'll see whether there's a sudden surge in number and at which location. So we'll monitor the situation closely. If there are any extraordinary cases, then we may have to step up fly control measures at a particular point. Do you have such figures on a daily basis? We're now still trying to design the system, so we haven't started. So you haven't laid the traps? No, not yet. Are you going to use the fly strips or something similar? Landfill is open area, is huge, so we have to find something that's effective in catching flies, and then we could collect the data and monitor the situation. In Hapag 9, between Hapag 9 and the landfly, with you also set up such traps, so we know where flies come from. Yes, we'll consider it, because at the landfill there's another exit leading to Hapag 9. Perhaps at those exits we may consider setting up such traps. Thank you. Okay, it's time. I think we have to extend the meeting by another 2 or 3 minutes. Any objection, please? No? Dr. Chen? The FEHD colleague just explained we're going to set up traps at specific locations. And before that, we've already stepped up inspection within the landfill. For example, we do go to Hapag 9 to see whether there's any odor problem. Now, because of the fly complaint, we also check the fly problem. Because we're close to Hapag 9 is at our back exit. That's why our staff go and visit Hapag 9 often. As for fly sprays or other pest sprays, we have stepped up such spraying exercises. As for the ditch where we dispose of animal carcasses. Animal carcasses are actually contained in plastic bags, but then we also still spray this disinfectant, and then we add a layer of 300 cm deep of soil, and so we try to keep out odor and breeding of pests. Now, we've been taking such measures all along regardless of the fly infestation problem, because we want to control the odor, we want to maintain environmental hygiene and so on. But if there are any good suggestions from FEHG, we'll certainly take that on board. Anything else on AOB, please? No? Meeting adjourned. Thank you. The Environment Bureau, Food and Health Bureau, and the FEHG. Thank you.